forget it. Morning, Mary J. So welcome to everybody. We're really excited after the first few sessions we had, and we want to continue, like we said in the email we sent out, looking at the behavioral standards and then working towards financial coaching credentialing. So we thought to fast pace that a little bit this morning, because last time we had such a wonderful discussion, but we spent the whole session just unpacking one behavioral standard, but it was so rich. But however, we would most probably like to share good practices with each other and engage around financial coaching also, and not just spend time on the behavioral standards and what financial coaching is and what the and the credentialing process. So myself, Andre, and Sharon had a discussion. So Andre will just quickly run through the behavioral standards and give some background for us. And thanks, Andre, for being part of the session this morning. I know the past week was a hectic one, and also the next week because you're on the roadshow, Comensa roadshow currently. So also all of the best with that. And then Sharon will facilitate this session for us, that we then spend some time in groups looking at the different behavioral standards, and then we can bring that back to the bigger group and then have a discussion on that. So that's more or less what we plan for today. And yeah, so over to you, Andre. Thanks.
Thank you, Hendrik. And yeah, we're excited, although we've had a busy week. And I'm still in Cape Town this morning, cloudless skies, but a lot of wind as usual. Sorry for the background noise. It's the best place I could get proper signal. Hendrik, how many would you like us to go through today? 2 or 3?
And you can high level perhaps just give background on all of them, Andre, and then we can go into groups and discuss those. So if that's fine with you, Andre. So,
perfect. All right. So the first time we did the contracting, and today we will then just briefly go through the rest. There's in total 9, but let's see how far we get. The second one there is communicating, and it's basically that you as a coach is able to listen actively, to clarify and broaden the client's understanding, as well as to encourage thinking, while also then paying attention to both the said and the unsaid, using open-ended questions in order to create options for the client to reflect on this, challenging their assumptions, and also provide opportunities for learning, and then provide feedback to the client that also meets the needs of the client rather than the needs of the coach. Then the third one there is building trust and rapport, and I think this is a very crucial standard within coaching. So it's to establish and maintain trust through open, honest, and ethical behavior, maintaining a safe space in which the client can courageously explore their own thinking, and also be alert to fear and doubt, and acknowledge and discuss them openly and without judgment. Then if we look at the next one, is creating awareness and opportunities for learning. And that's about expressing insights to the client in such a way that provides useful and meaningful feedback, and also for them to recognize the impact of their own thoughts and feelings about any given situation, and using their own knowledge and experience as a resource in a way that supports but does not impose on the client's decisions. Then the fifth one is designing actions and managing accountability. And I think this is so crucial, is towards the end of a session, usually, what is the next step that the client is going to take? And that's to guide them in developing and supporting an effective coaching plan in partnership with a client. So it's also not about your agenda, but it's a client's agenda, their action steps, what they will be able to achieve. And it's maintaining and holding on a relevant and effective client-centered coaching plan, and also holding the client accountable for implementation of the agreed upon action plans. Then it's also building self-awareness, Demonstrate sufficient self-awareness to have a realistic perception of your own strengths and weaknesses as a coach, and becoming aware of your own emotions, your thoughts and feelings, and that you are able to remain neutral and non-judgmental. Then the seventh one is creating opportunities for own personal and professional growth, and that is to seek out and act on feedback, to build on strengths and mitigate weaknesses, and demonstrate sufficient maturity to identify and deal with your own prejudices, biases, and or stereotypes. Then the eighth one is maintaining a coaching presence, is to be fully present and engaged during the coaching session, especially during virtual coaching sessions, as distractions are a lot more difficult to manage, and be aware of and manage your own coaching process and reactions, contributing positively to the coaching interactions, and be aware of any shifts within the client and manager's judgment of client situation, and adapt and align appropriately, and then identify and separate your own agenda from that of the client. And then the ninth one is to manage diversity. It's working with diversity and adapting behavior in response to unfolding contextual and cultural differences, and work with issues such as prejudice, bias, and stereotyping within unfolding cultural contexts, and demonstrate an understanding of and show empathy for past, current, and future cultural contexts. I think that's basically in a nutshell. So yes, I'll hand back to Hendrik and Sharon to divide you into groups, however they want to put people on to discuss whichever ones they are.
Hendrik, so how many groups can we, because if we tackle one competency or one behavioral standard per group, and then we feed back to the group on what we're seeing, and then we can discuss if you've got enough time for that. Should we try and tackle 5? Is there 4? I think
I now created, and my maths wasn't good. I wanted to go with 5 rooms, but I now created 4 while I was multitasking. Yeah, a good sign again that men is not good at multitasking, so that's fine. So we can then most probably, because we've got 8, so I don't know, perhaps your suggestion, Sharon, is that we tackle 4 and then we can come back, give feedback, and if we've got enough time, then we can jump back and do the next 4, and then we most probably will get better feedback and input. So room 1, so you can then allocate them to each of the rooms, one of the behavioral standards, then Sharon, so that's under it.
Right, so should we just make it easy? We say room 1 has got communicating, and then we move down. Room 2 has got building trust and rapport, and then room 3, creating awareness and opportunities for learning, and then room 4 will be designing actions and managing accountability.
That sounds 100%. Thanks, Sharon. And then I just want to ask if room 1, Nikki, if you can just keep like minutes for us, and then that we can also feed that back to the working group. And then room 2, Sharon, you there. Room 3, Marguerite, and then room 4, Mary J, if you can then just keep notes for us there, please. So okay, I'm going to open up the rooms for us. June, haven't I allocated you to a room? No, so you should be part of room 2, I see.
Okay, yeah, I see everyone one by one disappearing. Let's see if I can. Does it not want to allocate me to a room?
You allocated to room 2, so for some or other reason, I don't know why it doesn't give you the option to move to room 2. Let's see. Yeah.
Okay, so now you.
Look, room 1 was first back in the main room. Sharon, are you going to facilitate the feedback for us, please?
Sorry, you waiting for, okay, yes, we can do that. Okay, so thank you. That was awesome. I enjoyed my room, so I don't know how everybody else felt. So maybe we could just start with the communicating. I think it's the second competency. And so room 1, who would like to give feedback on that? So what we're feeding back now is maybe what was added to the competencies from a financial coaching point of view. Okay, we're not going to go through all of the competencies again. We can't take them away from Comensa's behavioral standards. But is there anything that we need to consider that's not there from a financial coaching point of view? Okay, so what came out of group 1 or room 1?
Hi, Sharon. Hi, everyone. I was the scribe for room 1 and taking down notes. So if the gentlemen don't mind, I'll just give a bit of feedback and I'll allow them to provide some feedback as well. So Sharon, our group needs to apologize because we didn't really have some time to actually work through the standards. So upfront apologies from us all. What came across quite strongly from the group, with a group of 4 of us, is along the way, some of us have either attended coaching with yourself, Sharon, or the UFS courses, or at UCT, etc. So that was a commonality amongst everyone in the group. And what came out very strongly is that in the past, as financial planners, clients would come to us and we had the misperception that we were the experts and we'd have to talk all the time and create the plan for the client. But Dion made a very important point when he said that we are just co-creators in terms of assisting clients to co-create their own plan. And when a client creates their own plan, chances of success is much higher. And Gavin also had some very great insight around deep listening. He's also done some coaching courses from the Alan Gray perspective, and he brought about the concept of deep listening and also, once again, designing a client's plan around their own life and not what we think it would be. Albie's feedback was also very similar, where he shared an experience where he first met with a client, and during the planning, it seemed like the client would not be able to survive on the monthly income, but allowing the client time and space to go back, chat to an accountant, etc. And the client came back with workable solutions. So that was also something very important. And from my side, also being fairly new to the coaching journey, I've always struggled with deep listening or active listening. So for me, it's an ongoing journey. I'm getting much better at it, but definitely work in progress from my side. But I think everything that the group said was very nicely summed up when Dion said listening and silence is actually what communication is. Any of the gene would like that further?
Okay, Nikki, just repeat the last sentence.
Yeah.
Because it just broke up a little bit. So listening and
Silence.
Silence.
And silence equals communication.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's very nice.
Okay.
I'm
Alright,
uncertain if any of the gentlemen would like to add any further, Sharon.
Anything further, guys? Are you happy?
I see Mariette's hand is up.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mariette, sorry. Okay, I was going to just ask, does anybody want to add anything from the rest of the bigger group? Okay.
I just want to maybe comment on the active listening, because I think the secret is not active. You know, you have to listen, but not actively. In the sense the deep listening is what is the secret, and the gaps and the silence. But active listening is actually confirming the whole time what a client is saying. I think to get more out of a client, one should not do the confirmation that you're actually hearing what the client is saying. You've got to just go through the gaps and keep quiet when it becomes very uncomfortable. So it would be an interesting thing for me, to just get the feedback from the group about active and deep listening. What is the most efficient, working with a client? In my opinion, it's got to be deep listening and not active listening.
Anybody want to comment on that?
I think there's definitely space for both. And in the feedback that I got recently in my own mentor coaching session was that I tend to sometimes listen so deeply that I don't listen actively enough or don't give enough feedback to the client or miss opportunities to create deeper awareness in the client. So I think there's a balance is definitely needed between active listening and deep listening so that we don't lean too much to one or the other.
Anyone else have a view?
Yeah, I think for me as well, active listening is kind of a check-in to be able to check if you're holding your own biases. So, just let's go back, to the client. Am I on the right page here? And it just creates that opportunity for them to say, actually no, or yes, you are. So I think, yeah, perhaps a balance of it is probably very important.
Okay, so is there anything that we need to add that we haven't already spoken about to this particular behavioral standard from a financial coaching point of view? So I hear the listening and the deep and the active. I've got all those notes. What else? You guys come from the group. Sorry, Andrew, yes?
So I just want to say what was interesting for me working through the behavioral standard was actually also not just reading the credential coach behavioral standards. Is actually, if you look at the other levels also, because I think the real communication actually, if I look at it, sits at the deeper levels, because I just made a note here, becomes aware of client's choice and word representing the internal representation and understanding. Question the client to follow up on what is both said and not said in relation to the client's agenda on CSC level. Uses questions that enable client to generate options that their own exploration by evoking awareness of client's own context. And I think that refers to what Nikki gave feedback on what was the discussions. And then on the CMC level was, and I think that's when one moved to a way of being as a coach. And the discussion that was going on in one of the groups is the other thing is the interrelationship between the different behavioral standards also, because they actually play out. And Natalie actually referred to that, and the part that was powerful for me personally when working through this again was, ask questions which challenge the client's assumption, elicit new insight, raise self-awareness and facilitate learning. And I think then it also relates. The other thing that I was thinking of, the behavioral standards, this apply to how we engage with the client, but also apply to our own biases, what Stephen referred to, because what communication is happening with me while I'm engaging? What is that voice in my own head that I must be aware of during communication? It's not just soliciting information from the client, but what is happening in me? What is perhaps that I want to jump in and share a story of my own life where I'm actually busy with the client's life and my story has got bugger all to do, although I can relate, is that thing of communication, which I thought is important also, so yeah, just a thought from my side.
If I could just add a last thing. I've Sharon knows this. I'm very analytical, so I've always thought details is important to clients. And so I actually bore my wife sometimes to death. She's a bottom line person, so she just says, get to the bottom line, cut out all the other fluff. But for me, because detail is important, I always want detail, and I always thought detail is important to clients. But since I've met Sharon and we've gone through a whole lot of process, and I've realized the detail, yes, we have to take care of the detail in the background to make sure all the calcs work, but it's actually to the client not important at all, because in a month's time, they won't remember the detail, but they will remember the plan, and if it's their plan. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. A lot of times financial advisors think the detail is super important to clients, but it isn't. They want to talk about life and what's important to them.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, Dion, is that we need to be aware of our own communication biases as well. What we think is important in how we listen and how we communicate.
Yes.
And sometimes put that aside and rather be paying attention to what the client needs in the communication style, because that's where the power lies. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And that's all about listening. Hey, so I mean, that's what Mariette was saying. It's like really sensing into what's going on for this client all the time, and how can I bring the best out of this moment for them? What do I need to bring to them? Okay, absolutely. Okay, so I'm getting that we're going to move on to the next one. If there's nothing else, if you guys think of anything, put it in the chat. Hendrik, you happy with me?
I saw Mary J's mic was off and then somebody else talked. I don't know if she just want to
Okay,
add some.
It was just very briefly, I put it in the comments now, the intention behind communication, which should always be for the client, not for me. And I think that's a big shift when we're coming from advice, because advice is about for me. I need to be the expert, position myself, elevate myself, deliver value. And now we're shifting into coaching where it's for the client. So everything I communicated is about what's right for you, Mr. Client. What do you need in this moment? How do I best serve you? That, and definitely that's moving through the levels up to the CMC and the way we are energetically in that space. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that, even in, you know, the context of, we're talking about like last week about phase stuff, is even in the kind of communication that we're delivering to clients, like the disclosure documents. What are those documents? Those aren't client-centric documents. Those are like, you know, if I tick these boxes, I'm not going to get into trouble. You know, we should look at even evaluating some of those things and to make a client-centric language. Like, what are we actually trying to bring across? And not from a compliance point of view, because that's about us.
I'm noting that as well. So I think we need to have a bigger conversation there. All right. So can I move on, Hendrik? Or we're going to all, okay.
Yes.
We can
Yeah.
move on to the next. Okay, so the next competency was my room. So building trust and rapport. Are you guys all right that I give feedback on this, Mariette? Or would you like to are you? Okay. All right. So I mean, we were comfortable with everything that was there. The one thing that came out, or there were a couple of things that came out that were different, maybe a different angle. And Mariette said that being aware of our own personal biases when we're doing financial coaching and when unpacking that, it's like I've got a certain relationship with money or a certain experience with money that might be tainting the way that I'm communicating or the way that I'm listening to whatever the client needs, and sometimes driving a certain agenda there. So making sure that we keep that. Keep awareness around that, so keeping our own stuff out of the room when we're actually engaging from a financial coaching point of view. And then building trust. June was saying that, you know, we've got listening and questioning and communicating, but that's also a huge competency, the listening and questioning and that we need to incorporate to be able to build trust as well. So, and I'm thinking from a point of view of, we do a lot of education work in financial coaching. I mean, something that's part of, you know, what is inflation? What is, you know, how does an equity work, and, you know, the return assumptions. And so there's a lot of education that happens in the financial coaching world as well, if we're bringing in financial planning into that coaching conversation. And how can we bring questioning into that space as well? So we're not telling. How do we question the client to get them to learn something new? Because then they're really learning it. And then we can see, you know, getting them onto this, into the place where they can start making decisions for themselves. And then the one thing that I think we're going to have a conversation around now is, when do we move between this whole, because this is the tricky part, because financial coaching has a certain financial planning element to it. You know, when do we move between advisor and coach, and how do we notice when that's happening, and what do we need to think about there as a behavioral standard? Is there something that needs to be unpacked there? So what are our thoughts? Any thoughts on that? Any of those things? That's anything around that.
Yeah, I'm very vocal on that one, and I think it's a journey that one goes through, just like this behavioral standards there. Most probably initially you'll dip your toes into it and you'll just use tools and templates and some questioning to deepen your relationship. But I think at the point in time, and that's well according to Hendrik, your way of engaging with clients becomes a coaching way of engaging with clients, and it becomes one. There's not a dance between I being a financial planner, I'm being a coach. I am a coach delivering financial advice. I'm a coach engaging in education of my client, and it becomes a way of being it, but it's a journey. So that's just my view on it.
So how do we, so that makes sense to me, Hendrik, but I'm going to challenge the group again. How do we know, and do we need to put something down in writing here, Andre, that brings clarity as to what are the behavioral standards around moving between the different modes that a financial coach would have to move between? And what are those different modes? Does it even exist? Or is financial coaching not financial planning, so we don't have to worry about it? Do we never give advice?
If I can maybe just give some feedback on that, I think I agree with Hendrik. I think it becomes a way of being. And I think it's easier to do with new clients, you know, because they also, I mean, you've got to be very careful. They technically don't know any different. But what I said in our group is you almost, because it's become a way of being, when you get a new client or a new client approaches you, you can almost pick up in their language, do they want to be coached, or do they just want financial advice? And I mean, then at that point you can, like, I mean, I had a client yesterday who said she doesn't want to go back to a broker because he's going to probably sell her another policy. And immediately I picked up, okay, she wants some form of coaching. And by questioning, you start getting understanding, what does this person actually want? And it's going to evolve into some financial planning. But what I prefer to do personally is offer that sort of that behavioral coaching first. And like Hendrik said, I mean, I've also got a toolbox of tools and templates, and I know, okay, that client's wanting that, and I need to know what I've got to underpin to be able to, you know, get to the root of it and to start planting seeds and dig out what we need to dig out and put new foundation in, and so on. So I think it's really, it's a listening skill. It's the art of listening to a client. And like I said, I think it's easier, well, in my experience, and Natalie also touched on something earlier. I think it's very, to try and go down that road of when you've worked with a client for 15 years, how do you cross over, you know? That's why it's for me, it's been like easier with a new client. So yeah, it's my input.
Andre, from your point of view, from a Comensa point of view, what are your thoughts on this particular topic?
I think it's what Mel just mentioned is very important to distinguish what are you actually doing with a client. It's the same as some coaches are also mentors, and it's about when are you mentoring, when are you coaching, when are you doing financial coaching, when are you doing financial planning. So I think that's really valuable. And yes, sometimes in a session, just maybe take that step back and, you know, think, what are you really doing right now, and are you telling the client or are you actually coaching? And there is a difference. But yes, there's some valuable stuff coming out, and I can just say, let's keep it going. Let's get the thoughts going, and let's make points of new ideas and see how we can collaborate it with the current behavioral standards and say, how can we adjust this specific point to be more relevant to financial coaching, for example. So yeah, that's about it for now.
Sharon, perhaps a question back to you. I know you've got somewhere picked up also a very good distinction between the two. you can most probably share that with us. And I think it links to Mary J's point that says perhaps we can link back to the behavioral standard 1, which is the contracting part. But I know you've got also a great distinction on this one.
Am I allowed to share this in the group? Okay, all right. So, I don't know who gave it to me, but somebody gave me a huge gift, and what they said to me was, when you're stuck between coaching and giving advice, you have to listen to what the client is saying, right? So if the client says to you, they want something, and what they're asking is based on your opinion of something. So you don't have fact. It's not like somebody asks me, like, what's the weather going to be tomorrow? I'm not going to go, so what do you think the weather is going to be tomorrow? And what makes you ask that question? I'm not going to do that because that's just frustrating. But if I have the facts, if I know it's going to be 23 degrees tomorrow, I can give that information, okay, because it's factual. I can find it evidenced somewhere. And so that helps me a little bit, because as soon as the client is eliciting my opinion, then I rather want to question back. I rather want to ask them what's going on for them and what they're seeing in it. But if it's a factual answer that they're requiring from me, what is the tax rate? What am I going to pay in tax if I have to sell this property? Then I'm going to give them an answer. Okay, so that works for me, but I don't know if that's the answer we need. Just helps me figure out the lines, because it is a little bit blurry sometimes.
Look, I was going to say something similar. It's about meeting the client where they are at that point. So, if they're asking a question where it is factual, you come out of a place of being an expert, and that also builds your credibility of who you are. But, I think, I often see these kind of like suited financial planners that come in with their textbook and then bombard the client all this information and fact sheets and this and that. And sometimes the clients are just like, either they get annoyed or they're actually just too scared. They think, oh, this guy must know everything. I've got to buy into it. But there's no magic that happens there. So I think, like, yes, we're taking this client on this financial journey, and there are times where we got to, use this factual stuff, but we're always financial planners. It's really about when a client's getting stuck, or you want them to see a different possibility, to be able to move into, a different place by taking an action, or just seeing something differently, to have an aha moment. That's where that's where I'd like to use the coaching in. But all of that creates a safe space, because you want to come from a place of, yes, you are an expert, but today is not about me, it's about you. So, well, what can we do for you? If you're creating that safe space, if you're using their language, that creates a safe environment, and I think, like, what I've learned, what I try to bring across to my clients is, I want my clients to go, hey man, Stephen gets me, and so everything I try to do is to be able to elicit that kind of response. The guy goes, or client says, but he understands me as a person and what I want. He's coming with this like prescribed idea or notion of what it's about. So those are kind of things, if I want to summarize it back, it's really about, in every opportunity, meeting them where they are at that moment. If they need factual information, give that to them. Because you also don't want to be sitting on the fence, what do you think? What are the tax rates? Well, what do you think the tax rates are? You're not committing to anything. And you can kind of come across like an idiot. So yeah, that's for me.
Frustrating. So I think, yes, Stephen, absolutely. And Mark, this is what you were talking to when we were speaking about being the professional, having managing expectations, which is the contracting that Mary Jo was saying earlier as well. So yes, I think we've got what we need.
And sorry, on that as well, even if you don't know the answer, it's about owning up to say, I don't know that, but I will get back to you on that, and then getting back to them. That also creates a kind of a safe place, a security, and the rapport, and that I'm not just waffling on anything. I genuinely don't know. Gives credibility.
Now you've brought something up, Stephen, that might also be something we need to consider, is that when we actually give an answer, we might lose an opportunity for further learning and insight for the client. So sometimes there's an opportunity to send the client away and say, don't find that answer, wherever it might, and then there's some more learning that happens there. So yeah, it's a very fine line. You're going to have to be very present and try and figure out in that moment, what's the best thing for this client right now? What do they need from me? And is it facts? Is it them going away? Is it me asking another question, for deep understanding?
So
Okay.
Sharon, perhaps a question to the group and then I think we're just going to get to trust and then we can touch on the other two when we get back next month. But the one question I was pondering looking at the behavior standards, because trust to a large extent is assessment by the client of us. And again, our assessment of what is the trust relationship with the client. So it's an assessment that's taking place here. However, I don't see that the behavioral standard talk a lot about our responsibility as a professional coach in terms of the trust relationship with the client and how the client view us. That's just something I pondered on.
Okay. Should we make a note and bring that back into the next conversation, Hendrik, so that everyone can? Okay, I'm going to make a note of that one. All right.
Is that not the last point on the CMC? Observes where trust is absent and discusses this freely on a meta level in the relationship, as well as trust of them in relationship to what they bring.
Yeah, I also circled that, Mary J, but yeah, I was pondering on, isn't there more to it that what need to bring it up front, most probably earlier, because I think that's critical, because if I'm not going to be aware of that, we can struggle through the relationship. So that was what I was pondering on, so yeah. Or mustn't that become then earlier, move that point in
Could
terms
be part
of
contracting.
Yeah. Or even in up to CSC level, perhaps, for us in terms of our relationship with the client, because I think that's where a lot of trust relationship breakdown. The client do not want to share with us perhaps things if the client do not observe us as trustworthy. I don't know. I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate. Yeah.
All right, so you're going to bring that one up again, Hendrik. I'm making a note to remind you to bring it up. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
And I would, I think that's a good. Andre can give us good insights, because most probably that was discussed somewhere in the behavioral standards discussions at Comensa also. So yeah. So from my side, thank you very much for again a unbelievable great and rich session of discussion, and yeah, looking forward to the next one. And everybody that indicated that they'll want to be part of the working group, we'll give you ASAP a date, and then we can just ponder a little bit on what being said. Yeah, and then the idea is then put this into writing and start developing a document that we can work with and share with the rest of you. So thank you very much from my side.